Okay, welcome to episode 12 of Clan Mythology. Let's begin with the word OOPArts, out of place artifacts. Now, for 2 centuries, archaeologists have been digging up artifacts that sometimes challenge orthodox or accepted chronological or historical order. Some OOPArts, out of place artifacts, are attributed to lost civilizations using high technology. Others are associated with visitors from other galaxies, and 99.5% of them are misinterpretations and hoaxes. There is a 0.5% there which remains, and that's exactly where this OOPArt, the genetic disc, fits. The genetic disc was discovered in Colombia in 1969 by Professor Jaime Liga Gutierrez. Found with hundreds of tiny artifacts, all made of the similar material known as lydite. The disc was taken to Germany and travelled around Europe in the 1970s, been exhibited by Dr. Klaus Donner in an artifacts exhibition of OOPArts, which all set out to challenge our understanding of our progression through evolutionary time. Sadly, in that artifacts roadshow, the OOPArts of Klaus Donner, this OOPArt was generally taken and regarded as a hoax by the historical or archaeological world at large. There is no firm reason for regarding it as a hoax other than the heritage or the pedigree of its discovery was lost through a series of complications. The actual location that the disc and its supporting artifacts were discovered was lost in time. And without such a pedigree, universities, museums, and scientists have to be super wary over such artifacts. However, I've spent 2 years now studying Professor Gutierrez's disc, and it's unlike other OOPArts. Let me explain why. If we look at the likes of the Antikythera mechanism that was discovered near Greece in 1901, now this was an astrolabe dating to 100 years BC. You know, that's 1,000 years before clocks and mechanical clockwork mechanisms were said to have been invented. So this is an OOPArt of the same category. It is, as we will see, a genuine artifact. The famous Phaistos disc was discovered in Greece. It's a similarly sized disc. We'll get to the size and weight of this in a moment. But it was discovered in the it was made in the 2nd millennium BC again. And it's basically a libation to a goddess. However, it's inscribed with a mysterious language similarly to the genetic disc. Another example would be the Negbra disc, discovered in Germany, which is dated to about 1600 BC. And it shows the moon, the sun, the 7 stars of the Pleiades culture, of the Pleiades constellation. And you know, that's 16 sound disc. So, returning to the genetic disc, or to begin with the genetic disc, as I say, discovered outside Colombia in 1969. Measures 22 centimeters in diameter. It weighs 2 kilograms. And it's made of lydite, otherwise known as touchstone, or to the scientist, black radiolarian chert, or black radiolarian chert, rather. What I'll do is give you a quick rundown of side A and side B, of the main symbols that construct the disc, and then we'll go down a level and get into what those possibly mean, and a little bit more about the dating and the origins of the disc will come later. What I don't want to do is start giving you my interpretations of what the disc is and what it isn't. I'd rather give you the data that I've extrapolated from the disc, and you can decide yourself at the end whether it's one of the quite obvious 3 options, which is a lost civilization. I say that because These symbols don't relate to the symbology of any known culture. Therefore, if this belongs to an ancient civilization, it's one that's dropped through the corridors of time. Secondly, as a lot of people like to think, was this left behind by visitors from another galaxy? Let's say the words, is this from ancient aliens? A lot of people out there like to think so. And C, is this a modern hoax? An elaborate creation from the mind of a 1960s hoaxer? So, we'll put the three options to the side and get on with delivering the data. Here we go. Side A, beginning at the bottom. There appear to be a female and a male character. The female character, as you can see, is holding her legs apart, showing her vagina. The male, you could imagine that it depicts sperm. Above the male and the female, we have what looks to be a spermatozoid. This here is 1/3 of the disc. Around the circumference, you can see 12 compartments or sections, each with a different detailed shape within. There's a hole at the center of the disc, and it's split into thirds with 1, 2, 3 lines. So already we have a disc on side A. And in this third, we have what appears to be a pregnant woman with full breasts. In this third, we have what appears to be a female child with a vagina and a male child with a penis. 3 indiscernible symbols. This looks very similar to Indonesian iconography. This, your guess is as good as mine. This looks to be a representation of E.T. himself. Look, he's even got a little telephone to phone home. So, I'm not quite sure what's going on in this third. This here, pregnant woman, male and female child, and a male and female forms. Let's call these life forms at the bottom. So, we're going to turn the disc around and we're going to look at side B, which is altogether different. Now, side B. Again, you can see that the disc has a line straight through the center, and again at 90 degrees we have a crossing line. There are 2 diagonal lines, and each of the compartments on this side of the disc contain multiple symbols. For example, here you have an adult with a child, a flying fish, and below them a water urn. Here we have what appears to be planets, but we're going to put these in a moment because a lot of people interpret these as eggs. Here we have what looks to be the Loch Ness Monster. We have a double S, almost like a mirror image of an S here. Around here we have what appears to be like crab type forms or stylized humans, but more reptilian and more crustacean-like than human forms. So, in side A, the symbology was generally relating to genetics, hence the name the genetic disc. This side has proved to be more problematic for people who've studied the disc. So what we're going to do now is have a look around the edge of the disc, because it is no less interesting. Look at this. Around the entire circumferential edge of the disc. Can you see it? Look at that. Is a serpent or a sperm with 1, 2, 3, 4 circles right there. 1, 2, 3, 4 coming out or being chased by the serpent right around the circumference. So, let me first tell you how Klaus Donner and a number of 70s and 80s professors interpret this disc. They interpret these as fetuses stages of growth. And that was loosely postulated because they look kind of human in form, okay? And it matched in with these being sperm and the unification of a male and female. So these represent fetuses. From that, the postulation was made that whoever carved the disc must have had access to a microscope. How else would you be able to visualize and then carve the different stages of fetal growth? Okay. And Oreo, it absolutely is a great big Oreo. So people get carried away, therefore claiming that this was carved by an ancient culture. They had access to microscopes, which were only invented 250 years ago. Therein lies the mystery of the genetic disc. Nobody in the 60s or 70s came up with much on the other side, apart from speculation to support the idea that this relates to some kind of lost civilization with advanced technologies. Because, look, eggs. Indeed, an unfertilized female egg, and boom, with sperm, a male fertilized female egg with the sperm inside. And of course, then they work around showing that these the cell split, and there's quite a complex set of ideas that goes into supporting that this was designed by an ancient civilization with access to high technology microscopes, for example, and an advanced knowledge of the progression of the human fetus from conception to birth. It does, in every sense, represent these concepts, the disc, as I'm about to show you, but not just as it's been purveyed for the last 50 years. And I think by ironing out what the disc actually shows and what it isn't, we're going to get a much clearer idea of what the disc is. Okay, let's go back to side one and start this proper. Here we go. This indeed does represent a male and female. And let's assume for a moment that this is indeed a genetic disc, helping people to make decisions regarding when to make someone pregnant, when to fertilize animals, when to sow crops into fields that could have been stylized as human growth. So let's assume for a moment, because of the two big indicators, the male and the female, the erection of the vagina and the sperm, that this is relating to genes. I've discovered that each of these 12 sections not only represents fetal growth, but it does so to an alarming degree of accuracy. Let's assume, why wouldn't we, that these 12 compartments possibly relate to the sun. They possibly relate to constellations. Let's assume symbolically for a moment that this disc is related in some way to astronomy, to astrology, possibly being used as a way to interpret or to predict when best to fertilize. Let's just say to fertilize at the moment. So the male sun, the female moon, and the unification of both around the central pole star with 12 constellations gives every single component of this side of the disk an astronomical interpretation. The sun and the moon, pole star in the center, the fixed point about which the cosmos rotates, and the 12 constellations, each representing a lunar month. The diagram in the first month, the first constellation, let's call it the first month of pregnancy, shows a fetus right here. Sorry, this is reversed. A fetus without any buds on its legs and arms. And then after the end of month one, right here, boom, a fetus with arm buds. Just as happens, it grows between 4 and 6 weeks. And then, let's not get hung on this, but let me show you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We get to the 6th month. And look at this disc in a purely astronomical context. What we find is that underlying the symbols of the genetic disc is a wholly astronomical template. I'm going to go through this quick. So when the disc is placed on the pole, if the arrow was aligned to the north, the arrow is aligned to the north, to the pole star, this and this line indicate the equinoxes, east and west, north, east and west. This line, therefore, indicates south. So we have north, south, east, and west built into the inherent geometry of the disc. Let me just excuse myself one moment. I'm going to resume on the other feed. So, let me begin that again. What we have here is an underlying astronomical format, a compass, the arrow pointing to the north, to the south, and the right-angled lines to the east and to the west. There's some form of compass, some way of indicating or helping somebody in the process of using the stars, the planets, and other astronomical phenomenon in the decision making of when to fertilize. So, coincidence that when aligned to the north, this arrow right here, and when aligned with the east and the west, these diagonal lines point at 66.5 degrees from north, right there, okay? 66.5 degrees from north. Surely that is beyond the realms of coincidence when you consider that the rising summer solstice sun once a year from Bogotá is observed rising at 66.4 degrees to the north. The angled lines on the genetic disc, when oriented with the north, are accurate to the summer solstice 0.1 of a degree. It's not 361 chance of being just a chance or luck. It's 1 in 3,600 chance of occurring by luck. The genetic disc is absolutely constructed as a compass that aligns with the solstices when observed from Bogotá. If you were to move 200 miles to the north or to the south, the genetic disc would not indicate the correct angles for the solstices. It is designed upon the celestial geometry of Bogotá, Colombia. So therefore its pedigree and heritage is Bogotá, Colombia, or at least the Bogotá savanna. So therefore we would expect it to indeed be related in some way to the Chibcha culture or to the Chibcha language group. It's not. We'll return to that in a while. Let's stick on the disc, because what we're looking at here is a tool that when mounted on a pole could be brought into any town or village, pointed to the north, and somebody could quite simply count off how many months to a selected month in the year to have the child. He could look along his alignment and tell somebody when the sun rises behind that mountain, or when the sun sets beyond that lake, or when you see the first rays of the sun appear along the edge of that cliff. That's when you have your guinea pigs do the wild thing. That's when you have your cattle go to business. That is when your queen and king might attempt to have a child, a future Zipa, or a ruler. So this disc, when interpreted as a compass, which it quite clearly is with its north pointing orientation marker, and when doing so, south, east, west, and the 4 solstical rises and settings, 2 risings, 2 settings of the year, is all embedded into the disc. That that's quite a interpretation of the B side of the disc. Let me show you what happens here. Okay, look at the top here. So, not only have we found a template for a compass and astronomical geometry within the structure of the disc, but then, when we look at side B, can it be a coincidence, is the question, that on the first age of Chibcha creation myths, Chimney Gaga, the supreme nothing, that was everything. He who was nowhere and everywhere at once, he who was before light and created light. The keeper of the golden trinity of Chimney Gaga was a circle, right here. The circle made light here. And in the 2, 3, 4th age of Chibcha creation, from Laguna Iguague, in the north part of Colombia, of the Altiplano Basin or the Altiplano Savannah, right here, from the lagoon, the waters of the lagoon, there's the water carrying urn, rose Bachwe, the mother goddess, and her 3-year-old son, Kuzo, he of the night. So on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th age, as told in Chibcha creation myths, you've got the emanation of Bachwe and Kuzo, who brought civilization to the Muisca people of one of the derivatives of the Chibcha group, one of the high civilizations of North South America, if you like. The Muisca people, who this disc should belong to, were one of the high civilizations in that they forged equal amounts of gold as the Aztecs, the Incas, and the Mayans. However, returning to the disc, we've got Chibcha origin myths, again relating to creation, fertility, and the associated spiritual dynamics with these things. The cultures we're talking about here had moved from the hunting-gathering stages about 4000 BC, the Harara era. And by about 1500 BC, they were wholly agriculturists. They were growing quinoa, corn, potatoes in enormous amounts. They were mining emeralds with surrounding nations, Ecuador, Venezuela, for gold. And they were forging gold wholesale, blending it with silver and copper and making tumbaga, offerings to the gods. Their culture was alive with offerings to fertility and to the energies of creation contained in a philosophical concept known as the creation trinity, the golden creation trinity of Chimney Gaga. On one side of the disc we have the creation story of the Chibchas, even to details such as this, which I said at the beginning looked like the Loch Ness Monster. Of course it's not the Loch Ness Monster. However, in Lake Tora, in the northern part of the Muisca territories, is the largest freshwater lake in Colombia. It too has the legend of a beast. It has the legend of a lake monster in exactly the same vein as the Loch Ness Monster. But that monster appears at the beginning of spring, when people are planting seeds, when people are worshipping and bringing in the rainy season to fertilize their fields with male fertility energy. The disc therefore shows symbols of Chibcha creation on one side, and it shows systems of predicting when to plant seed, to fertilize animals and humans on the other side. Now, to go a little bit further into this mystery, let's put it back in context. Because what everybody fails to do with this disc is interpret it with the other artifacts that were found with it. I posted those in the Clan Mythology Facebook day today. You can go there and have a look at them. These are a range of about 250 tiny centimetre to 3 centimetre long tools devices carved in the same shapes as the symbols on the genetic disc. They're ergonomically perfect in the sense that they fit into your fingers with such precision that it's almost as if they're growing from your fingers. They're like extra nails. They have points, they have edges, they have cutting sides. Some are sharp, some are blunted. Each looking as if it served some form of purpose. Now, what I'm going to postulate here is absolute speculation, but stick with me. If this disc indeed was used as a compass to help people know when to fertilize, let's just say when to fertilize, and a range of tools were found, each handheld, each relating to the symbols on the disc, and each interpretable as a medical instrument. Could then accepting that this is an ancient artifact, not from Andromeda Galaxy, and not a hoax, could an ancient culture have been experimenting with human cadavers, looking at wombs and at fetuses, possibly from mothers who had died through childbirth, in efforts to reduce the amount of people who died through childbirth, the largest taker of human life in the evolution of mankind, or humankind rather, of the 106 billion estimated people, well over 2/3 must have died of the woman side of things through childbirth. Knowledge of how to raise survival through the pregnancy process was everything. So what got us from the caves to where we are today, so what got us from the caves to Mars, was understanding fertility. So, now we're at a bit of a deep level, let's question further into that assumption. If indeed someone from an ancient culture was experimenting with human fetuses to increase their understanding of such things, how then could he depict the stages of a fetus without a microscope? I want us to make the assumption here, the safe assumption for a moment, that they didn't have microscopes, okay? We've agreed that they didn't come from the Andromeda Galaxy, and we're assuming for a moment this isn't a hoax. So, how then could they see? Well, my research has shown that going against every single professor that's looked at this disc since 1969, believe it or not, a very sharp young eye can indeed see. A 4-week-old fetus does arm buds. You can see that. It's less than 2 millimeters long, but you can see it. And contrary, again, to the allegations or the assertions that one would need a microscope, this here, the second month, when it grows arm buds, you can see those buds. A young, trained eye can see them. As can it see the third month, obviously, with the leg buds, and when the brain forms here in month 6. So what I'm saying is, this disc and the symbols on it could have been achieved without use of a microscope. But here comes the paradox. If that is the case, and if someone has indeed deliberately designed these different stages of human fertility, this all relates to fertility, even as a compass, as a tool to tell someone where the sun might rise or set at a certain time of the year, then surely those two are relating to fertility. Which brings us back to the problem with, if these are human eggs with sperm, which they appear to be, how then could somebody see that there was an egg, unfertilized and fertilized? Because you cannot see a human egg, whether it's fertilized or unfertilized. It's different from fetuses. So therefore, that kind of gets me to the conclusion in all this. We're not finished yet. I'm talking about conclusion on the interpretation of the symbols. We haven't even started yet. with where this came from. The disk was 4 stages of creation, with the arrival of Bachewe and her son from the Laguna Iguagi. They returned, I mean, look, here's how perfect this is. Once Bachewe and her son had gone through the 6 stages of creation right here, they returned to Laguna Iguagi as 2 serpents, believe it or not, right there, 2 serpents. So whoever created this, certainly this side of the disc, and we can make the assumption both sides were created by the same hand. The entire side of this disc speaks of the creation myths of the Chibcha people, and the entire side here, again, is detailed with male and female and the progression of fetuses through the 9-month period up to the birth of the mother, and then boom, winter solstice passes and we start all over again. The woman hits month 12 and she's ready to have children again. We've got a complete cycle here. So here we go. Big question. Who on earth created the disc? When was it created? And how was it created? The disc was dated in the 1970s by a Dr. Hammer. Allegedly. The disc showed signs around the edge of raising. It kind of almost looked as if it had corrosion. What this was, the scientist who studied the disc said, water has penetrated the lydium surface of the disc, and over the years it's crystallized, and it's formed protrusions and weaknesses within the strata of the lydite, which is like layers and layers of leaves pressed down really, really hard. For the damage to have occurred that was measured on the disc, the assertion was that it was dated to, we've written, 9,800 BC. 9,800 BC. Others contested the dating. There's no way it can be carved out 9,800 BC. We only came over the Bering Straits 13,500 years ago. It would have taken at least 3,000 years to get down to Colombia. And then a civilization would have had to have learned enough about fertilization, human growth, survival, agricultural, because this doesn't relate to hunter-gatherers, this relates to agriculture. So, of course, that faction of skeptics said, because the symbology or the symbols don't relate to any of the cultures known since 5000 BC, that the disc must relate or have come from a culture pre 5,000-6,000 BC. So we've got a bracket of dating between 9,800 BC and 6,000 BC. That makes this disc right in front of you right here, my desk, one of the oldest, certainly the most important, cultural, astronomical, geographical, scientific, cartographical, astrological artifact ever discovered in the history of mankind. Of course it does. What else is there like it? Nothing. And then there's a band of people who are thoroughly convinced that this could be nothing but a hoax. An elaborate hoax designed to mislead designed to make money, designed to draw attention. That's where I've got the advantage on every other researcher that's ever looked at the genetic disk. A key advantage. Over 2 years, I've gotten to know Professor Jaime Legia Gutierrez really, really well. Not only is he a gentleman, and not only has he extended endless amounts of friendship when I arrived in Colombia, where a friend was one of the most distant things in my paradigm. Gutierrez was there. He introduced me to his disc and showed me all of the artifacts in his collection, and has spent a lot of time explaining to me what he personally believes the disc is and isn't. And I realized 6 months ago that much of my interpretations regarding the solstice angles, regarding the grouping of the fetuses, regarding the appearance of buds, like buds, appearance of the brain on month 6, was beyond his understanding of the disc. And while it's easy to pull the bluff or to pull the wool over somebody's eyes once or twice, it's very difficult to sustain such a thing. I know him, and I trust him, and I trust that this, if it's a hoax, is not his hoax. The understanding of cheap creation myths that I've explained in this only scratches the surface of my understanding of them, and that's taken me 2 years of absolute absorption in Muisca culture to get a brief and surface understanding of the cosmology of the creation mythology, and the level of understanding of creation mythology that appears in this disc, I believe, could only have come from the mind of an indigenous person. Why then have I found it? Well, that's because I've consulted the indigenous Muisca community at Guatavita. I've discussed creation mythology with indigenous people in Colombia for 2 years, some of whom see the symbols here in the rock art in the Bogotá savannah, and I do too. Certain symbols appear in the rock art of the Muisca people in the Bogotá savannah, but 90% of it doesn't. I actually think 100% of it doesn't. I think the people who see the circles relating to the circles in the rock art are projecting a want onto it. I don't know if the symbols are the same. Because if we assume for the moment that the dating on the disc is right, which we'll come back to shortly, that the conclusions or the protrusions in the disc could only have been caused with nigh on 10,000 years of penetration with water penetration, then the disc comes from a culture that all we know about is through the disc and the several hundred tiny artifacts that were discovered with it. It doesn't belong to any South American symbol group that's known about. It doesn't have any elements of having belonged to the source of the roots of any of the known languages or stylized art forms. We don't see them in the craft works of any of the South American cultures. It truly is an enigma. So, we have 3 distinct options. Is the genetic disc an artifact dating between 6 and 10,000 years ago from an ancient lost culture that's dropped through the corridors of our understanding of time? Is the disc evidence of ancient aliens who've travelled from the Andromeda galaxy, shown us how to fertilize each other and gone away because we needed that after 4 million years of successful evolution? We need somebody to come along and show us how to get wacky with each other. Right, so let's put a bracket right in the middle one. Or C. Is it just a big elaborate hoax? if you interpret the disc with all of the other artifacts that have been discovered, and you do so in the company of Mr. Jaime Lega Gutierrez, there is no rationally thinking person out there that would say someone has gone to the lengths of creating a disc, a really shitty hoax. Because wouldn't you, if you're going to create a hoax that was going to be of any value, use the symbols of a recognized culture? Wouldn't you use influences from a recognized symbol group so that it could possibly be tailored into being pre any one of 100 groups, indigenous cultures here in Colombia? Why would you choose to create an entirely new set of symbols that quite naturally most archaeologists are going to immediately write off as a hoax? Why would you do that? Professor Gutierrez is one of the most respected Professor Gutierrez is one of the most respected industrial designers in Colombia. He is no fool. Recently, in his 80s, he has invested in designing replicas of the disc, and he's giving them out for next to nothing. I know what they cost to make, and I know what he's getting back for them. Why would somebody with such a renowned career, with so much respect, not only create a hoax on a disc, but then go to the lengths of replicating the hoax and trying to sell it? Doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. And what is more, while Professor Gutierrez has a deep and rich understanding of geometry and shape and design, my observations on this as a compass aligned with the north, south, east, west, the 12 compartments of the months, so I have to conclude myself without choosing ABC. The genetic disc can only ever and truly be understood through one exercise, and it's exactly what's happening next. We're filming a documentary sometime in the next 8 months. What we're going to do is we're going to take the disc and we're going to go out to ancient Chibcha culture group, ancient Chibcha culture sites in Colombia with rock art, petroglyphs, pictograms. We're going to compare the symbols on the disc to the rock art around Colombia. And only then will we be able to decide whether this is indeed an artifact from a prehistoric civilization that's been lost in our understanding of South American cultures, that fits in just after the arrival of the first people from North America. That's not even starting to ask and raise the question, which so many folks out there have got, and you're really annoyed probably that I've not gone into, is this. Did this possibly come from a culture that was here before Clovis' first people arrived? There is evidence 12 miles away from Bogotá of a culture that not only bred guinea pigs, systematically engineered the genetics of guinea pigs to sustain survival. But sites have been found in Chile dating to 24,000 years BC. 2 sites in Colombia date to 24,000 years BC. No longer regarded as misinterpretations by the archaeological community at large. Does this disc provide the missing piece in a jigsaw puzzle in a big hole sometime between 24,000 BC and 11 to 12,000 BC, when the signs of the first hunter-gatherers appear in the highest hilltops in Colombia, when they were floating around in canoes, when Colombia was still submerged in a great part of the Bogotá savanna? So is it the missing link? Is it ancient alien artifact, or is it a hoax? You decide. But I would be loving to hear your ideas and thoughts, because the whole idea with this is now is for us to film this and put this all together as a story, we need questions. I've laid out a heap of questions today, but I'd really like your ideas, no matter how bizarre you might think they are. I've heard them all. Seriously, you cannot out-bizarre some of the theories on this disc. This disc, to some, is a map of Atlantis. It's been left here by wandering Atlanteans who founded the Moiscas before going off up north, founding the Mayans, and so on and so forth. Some people believe this has... The reason we can't identify them as South American symbols is because they come from China, ancient China, and that civilization came here sometime in prehistory, dropped off this disc, possibly even taught folk how to breed, because we needed that from China, see. So guys, don't be afraid to put your necks out there and comment threads, and let's get on this thing, try and figure out what it is, and I'll let you know when the documentary's out next year. But thanks so much again for tuning in to another episode of Clan Mythology. It's been really good fun just being able to speak freely and openly with a big bunch of open-minded people. It's really important. And come and join us in Clan Mythology, and if you're on YouTube, press subscribe up in that box there. That's important to us. And we'll see you on Saturday for another episode. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.